I rarely turn to Craigslist first when I need to buy something, but sometimes it's possible to find good deals on items that would otherwise be very expensive. At one time, I was searching for new workout equipment, and weights and machines are really costly to buy brand new, so Craigslist seemed like the perfect way to find used ones affordably. Anyway, I spent a few days scrolling through the site before I eventually came across a posting that looked very promising. It was a set of weights offered at a pretty good price and had just been posted a few hours earlier. The person listing it was named Mary, so I sent her an email expressing my strong interest in the weight set and mentioning that I wanted to pick it up as soon as possible. Mary replied just a few minutes later, letting me know she would be available that evening when she got home from work around 7. It was a bit late, but since I wanted the weights immediately, it wasn't a huge issue for me, so I agreed. She then sent me her address. Naturally, I looked it up to see where it was and what the house looked like. It was about 20 minutes away, in a small neighborhood that I actually recognized because an old friend used to live nearby. The house was a regular size and didn't have any distinctive features other than looking pretty old, but nothing seemed particularly strange or gave me a bad feeling. So that night, I drove down there. The place was at the end of a cul-de-sac, so I parked alongside the house near their mailbox and made my way up to the front door, which was already open. I didn't want to just walk into the house, so I knocked on the open door a few times to get someone's attention. A moment later, a man came down from the hall. I was supposed to meet Mary to look at the workout equipment she'd posted on Craigslist. The man's face lit up, and he invited me to come on in. He explained that Mary would be downstairs in a few minutes because she was changing out of her work clothes. This definitely made me cautious, but he sounded genuine and believable, so I followed him into the living room where there was a set of weights on the ground. However, aside from the weights, there was nothing else in the room. No furniture or decorations at all. I think the man noticed me looking around, because he quickly said they were in the process of moving out, which was why they were selling the weights. Still skeptical, I looked at the weights for a second, but immediately noticed that a few plates were missing. I asked him if this was everything, as I thought I'd seen more in the pictures. He smiled again and said Mary might know where the other ones were, but then he just stood there looking at me. I got really uncomfortable and asked if he could go check on Mary to let her know I was there. He waited for a moment and then agreed, walking up the stairs. I was obviously starting to worry that Mary might not even be a real person, so I listened intently to hear if he was talking to someone. After a few seconds of silence, I went over to the bottom of the stairs and looked up towards the top. The man was standing there at the top, just staring at the wall, probably waiting up there to make it seem like he actually went to ask someone. I went into a panic, knowing now that this was all a lie and I was likely in the middle of something horrible. I started quickly walking towards the front door, trying not to alert the man. But as soon as I turned around, I heard heavy footsteps rushing down the stairs. He called out for me to wait, but I ran straight out the front door and into my car. Strangely, as I drove away, the guy ran out the front door and around the side of the house. I pulled over after driving out of the neighborhood and called the police to tell them what had happened, hoping they could figure out what was going on. I didn't really know what the man's plan was, but I was confident he was up to something. Later, the officers came by my house, and I gave them more details. They told me that the house I'd met him at had been empty for over a year, which sent chills through my body. Of course, I couldn't really give them much helpful information other than a description of what the man looked like. Other than that, all they had was the weights he'd left in the empty house, which might have fingerprints on them. It worries me that he might still be out there, trying to lure people into abandoned homes, but I'm also glad that I was able to get out of there before he could do whatever it was he planned on. Doing Story 2, I had just graduated from college and needed a small place to stay while I searched for a new job. I was working part-time at a small grocery store, but now that I'd graduated, it was time to start looking for something better. Anyway, apartments were far too expensive for me to rent on my own, so I was mainly looking for places that had spare rooms for rent. I knew it would be awkward for a while living in someone else's house, but I didn't really have much of a choice, to be honest. My old college roommate suggested looking on Craigslist, since most other sites at the time didn't allow postings for single rooms in a house. Or maybe it was just really difficult to find them that way. Either way, Craigslist seemed to have a lot of options, so I stuck with it. After a few days, though, I started getting frustrated because none of the people I contacted replied, and the few who did just apologized and said the room was already taken. But then, on Saturday morning, a new room listing appeared. It was nearby, cheap, and looked pretty nice. In the description, a man named Tom was advertising a large house with a spare bedroom for rent, which also had a separate bathroom and closet. This sounded perfect to me, so I emailed him about my interest and then went to work. I knew the listing had just been posted that morning, so I felt fairly confident I was one of the first to contact him. On my lunch break, I checked my emails and Tom replied, asking me to come and view the place that afternoon. I knew I'd be tired after work, but I also really wanted this place, so I agreed, and we set a time. After work, I drove straight there, which was only about a 10-minute drive. From the outside, the house looked really nice. It honestly just looked like a regular, medium-sized neighborhood home. I parked on the side of the road and walked up to the door, then knocked lightly. After 30 seconds, I knocked again, a bit harder this time. A minute later, I pulled out my phone to text Tom. But just before I sent the message, he opened the door and invited me in. I immediately noticed he was sweating a lot, as if he'd just finished a long workout, and he smelled awful. I didn't want to be rude, so I just ignored it. He began walking me around the ground floor, showing me the kitchen and the living room. He mentioned he didn't use these rooms often, so I wouldn't have to worry about getting in his way. However, looking at the rooms, it seemed like he did use them often. Old dishes were piled up in the sink, and the couch had stains all over it. I really didn't like how dirty the whole place was, and it was strange that in the pictures the house looked really clean. One thing I specifically remembered was that the living room had a brown leather couch in the picture, but the couch that was actually there was black. I figured Tom was probably using old pictures of the house from before it was sold. I was a bit annoyed at the dishonesty, but all that really mattered was my room, which was upstairs. Tom led the way to the stairs, then stopped at the bottom and held out his hand as if gesturing for me to head up first. I got a weird, uncomfortable feeling as I started up the stairs, especially since Tom didn't follow me. He stayed at the bottom and smiled, saying my room would be the first one on the left. I continued to the top and took a couple of steps into the hallway before a soft thud came from behind the door to what was supposedly my room. I looked back down the stairs at Tom, whose smile was now completely gone. He replied in an annoyed tone, saying it was just one of his friends staying the night and not to worry about it, then urged me to check out the room for myself, saying he was sure I'd like it. I was definitely pretty nervous at this point, scared even. Why wouldn't he have told me someone else was there? It seemed like something I should know. Everything started adding up, and all I wanted was to get out of there right away. I tried to act confident and began walking back down the stairs, explaining that the place wasn't going to work out for me. He didn't seem to like that answer, and moved his body to block most of the bottom of the stairs. I stood a couple of steps away and firmly told him I needed to leave. He asked me again to check out the bedroom, to at least see if I liked it, and again I said I was not interested. He looked at me for a moment, then, to my surprise, he smiled and said, "Okay," stepping aside. I quickly walked past him and straight out the front door. I don't know what was going on in that house, but something didn't feel right about any of it. I even felt lucky to have been able to leave so easily. In the moment, I thought I was going to have to force my way out. I checked Craigslist a couple of hours later, and the posting had been removed. I still wonder who or what was in that room upstairs. For all I know, it could have just been an empty room, but something tells me it was something much worse. Story 3. I lived with a friend of mine whom I'll call Nick, in a small house for a few years during college. He was my roommate for the first year, and then we decided to move out of the dorms and share the rent on a house, since we both had decent enough jobs. This was both of our first times renting a place, so we didn't really know how to budget properly. After a few months, things were okay, but it was almost a year in when we realized the place was eating up both of our bank accounts. The obvious solutions were to either move out or find another roommate. Neither of us wanted to leave, so we started searching for one. We began by asking all our other friends, but none of them were interested. So really the only option was to post online. I made a post on Facebook Marketplace, and Nick made a post on Craigslist. Again, neither of us had ever done this, and it felt kind of weird, but we knew we didn't have much of a choice. A few weeks went by with just a couple of responses, but none of them were seriously considering moving in. Before Nick showed me an email he got from someone named Sam replying to his Craigslist post. The guy seemed legitimate, and the following day he came over to view the house. I should mention he was a couple of years older than us and had just graduated, but he seemed pretty nice and looked clean-cut, so we were glad to have him. He agreed to the rent split and moved in the next week. In the few months that followed, Sam would hang out with us a lot, and we actually got to know him pretty well. But then, all of a sudden, he became very closed off for some reason. Nick and I would barely ever see the guy, and when we did, he wouldn't even talk. He would mostly sit in his room with his door shut, and would only come out to get food or to go to work. It didn't bother me necessarily, I just found it a little strange. Anyway, it was around the 4th month of him being there that things started to take a turn for the worse. I had just gotten home from work, and immediately, as I walked through the door, Nick quietly called my name from the living room. "What's going on?" I asked. He mentioned that Sam was home and told me not to talk too loud. Then he told me about a strong smell he noticed when passing Sam's room that day. I told him I hadn't noticed it. He pointed down the hall towards Sam's room and told me to quietly walk past and see if I noticed. So I got up and quietly made my way down the hall towards Sam's door. I didn't even have to get very close to smell what he was talking about. It was awful and really disgusting. I had no idea what it was, and had definitely never smelled it in the house before. Nick suggested we ask him what it was, and I agreed. We both went to his door, trying not to breathe in too hard, and knocked. Then we knocked again and again, calling out to him, but he didn't answer. Nick said he was sure that Sam was in there, but after a couple more minutes, we just gave up and figured we'd ask him tomorrow. It was already pretty late at that point, so we both quickly made dinner and then ate while watching TV in the living room. Then we both went to bed. The next day, I caught Sam on his way out of the house and asked him what the smell was last night. "Oh," he said, "I was just taking out the trash." He quickly left and drove off. That answer didn't really make any sense to me, but I didn't want to press him too hard. I told Nick later that day, and he agreed that it was weird but didn't know what else to do, so we left it at that. Another couple of weeks went by. Again, Sam barely talked to us, but the smell had gone away by then. I got home from work late one night, and Nick and Sam were both in their rooms, probably already asleep, so I basically went straight up to my room and fell asleep as well. But sometime in the middle of the night I woke up hearing some movement below my room, which was where Sam's room was located downstairs. I listened for a couple of minutes, trying to figure out what he was doing, but eventually I fell back asleep. The next morning, Sam ran out of the house to go to work as usual. However, he didn't return home that night. Another couple of days went by and he still hadn't come home. I called him multiple times and his phone instantly went to voicemail. We were actually starting to get worried and decided to check his room to see if there were any clues about what was going on. His room was pretty messy and actually looked like a lot of his stuff had been packed up and taken out. I also found a pair of glasses in his drawer with some other random belongings, which was weird because Sam didn't wear glasses. He left some clothes and all of his furniture behind though, which made us believe he hadn't just suddenly moved out. Nick ended up calling the police to notify them that Sam might be missing. An officer arrived that night to investigate and ask us questions. We told him everything we knew and let him look at Sam's room. Nick also gave him a picture we'd taken together back when Sam first moved in. After that, we didn't get an update until a week later. A different detective called us and informed us that the identity of the man in the photo with us was not Sam. They said a family member recognized him as their missing son who had been gone for almost a year. After that, the case got a lot more complicated, and we didn't have much helpful information because the guy had basically lied about everything he told us. So after a little bit, we lost contact and stopped getting updates. As far as we were told, the man was just some regular guy living with his parents who suddenly went missing for no known reason. He never came back to our house though, and I'm not sure if he was ever found. It's definitely the most interesting and creepy experience I've had though. Just knowing that I was living in the same house as someone who made up a completely fake identity and was legally missing gives me chills every time I think about it. It's pretty hard not to assume that this man was trying to hide from the police because of something he had done or was still doing. Foreign.